Welcome to Perspective with Derwin L. Webb. I am Derwin L. Webb. We are at the Ali Center having an opportunity to speak to someone that I've been wanting to talk to for a very long time. And I'm very pleased to be able to be here today with the current president and CEO of the Ali Center, Miss Marilyn Jackson. Miss Jackson, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Now, I have done a lot of research about you, but this is my first opportunity to actually meet you in person. So for those that don't know you, I know that Brooklyn's in the house. I know that you are from Brooklyn by way of Jamaica.
That's correct.
Tell us about what life was like for you growing up in Brooklyn.
Yeah, Brooklyn's a super urban area. We lived in Brooklyn. I grew up in the 70s and early 80s, and Brooklyn was filled with lots of things, culture, multiple people from diverse backgrounds. But I think for me as a kid, one of the great things about growing up in New York is that subway system gives you a passport to any place you want to go in the city, and I definitely enjoyed it. I got on that subway and went to museums, went to the theater. Used to be when I was in high school, you could buy 2 theater tickets for I think it was literally $40. 2 Broadway theater tickets for $40.
Can you get that today?
No. And so my girlfriends and I would go on a Saturday and we'd go see a show on Broadway. So that was, for me, New York was just, filled with a lot of adventures, a lot of exploration, a lot of ability to do creative things, and a lot of freedom.
So it kind of formed you into the person you are today, obviously.
Yes.
So you go from Brooklyn. Talk about your matriculation as far as your education is concerned.
Yeah, so I am a person who, and people, would often ask me, tell us about your path. And I was like, my path is all over the place. I went to the High School of Music and Art and thought for a moment that I wanted to be a musician, and then changed my mind, and then decided to apply to college, and ended up at Cornell University, and I ended up majoring in biology and sociology. And left college and had no idea what I wanted to do. Moved to Washington, D.C. on a fluke with one of my friends, and found my first job there, which was managing a statistical database. And about 6 months into the engagement, the company had their first competitor that was underpricing the assets they were selling for $10,000 a year for a subscription. They were pricing them at $2,000, and they said, we have the same data for 20% of the price. Well, it couldn't possibly be the same data. So the question became, how did we tell the truth about our product and differentiate ourselves? And they looked, I was, 24-year-old young lady, and they were like, yeah, marketing work, that's girls' work. And they asked me to kind of figure out how to put together a marketing plan. I had no idea what I was doing. I figured it out, but I loved it, and that's how I got into marketing.
Which led you to a job in Chicago.
Which led me, well, actually, it led me to graduate school. So after a few years of doing that, I said, I should probably really learn how to do that. So I decided to apply to MBA program, and applied to several MBA programs, and was accepted to Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, where I majored in marketing and strategy. Well, so I graduated in 1992, and that was a terrible year. The economy was in a recession. There were a handful of opportunities for me, and none of them I was really engaged in. So I took some time and did some freelance work, and then I was offered an opportunity to work for Six Flags Great America as a strategic planner.
Well, talk about that a little bit.
Oh, it was so much fun. Six Flags was a hoot. But it was Six Flags at that time was owned by Time Warner, and what they were trying to get away from is that the parks really operated independently, and they would always ask for capital improvement money for things like roller coasters and new rides, but they weren't really thoughtful about what kind of rides and how they wanted to develop the park. So they asked me my job was to come in look at the park and make an assessment on how the park should develop for its own best financial future. And what we came up with was we should be more family oriented, and we need less roller coasters and more family rides and more family themed entertainment. And so we put together a $50 million proposal to the parent company, and they funded it. And then we started building out those new themed areas. And so it did that for about 2 years, and then moved into communications, worked for Ameritech, which was a Baby Bell company. But it was a Fortune 100 company, and ended up in corporate communications, managing advertising agencies, media planning, corporate sponsorship, market research, and I got exposed to all of that in a really high level way. And then I had my first child. Ameritech was bought by SBC, and they were moving all the corporate functions to Austin, Texas. And my husband got a job in LA, so there was a time of big turmoil for my family, and we ended up moving to Los Angeles for 4 years. I had 2 more children. Came back to Chicago, and somebody I worked with at Ameritech called me one day and said, "Hey, I heard you're back in town. I'm looking for a director of marketing for the Museum of Science and Industry. Would you consider it?" And I had 3 kids under the age of 5, and the Museum of Science and Industry is a mile from my house. And I said, "This sounds like a good deal for Marilyn." And so I threw my hat in the ring. And that's how I got started in the nonprofit world.
Okay, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about your relationship with nonprofits, especially museums, because it sounds like your background is a lot with that. So what you briefly talked about being in Brooklyn and going to museums. So I'm going to assume that you love museums to begin with. Talk about your first job in Chicago for the museum.
Well, the Museum of Science and Industry is...
and I've been there. I love it, by the way.
Okay, so you know, it's hard for people to understand the enormity of the museum. We used to say it's 14 acres under one roof. You know, a small exhibit is 5,000 square feet. I think the largest exhibit is 35,000 square feet, which is like half of this building at the Ollie Center. But it was also a place that... when I got there in 2004, had seen better years. You know, it kind of had lost its way a little bit. It kind of became like a trade show for corporations. So corporations would rent facilities and like put in their new inventions. It was actually, to be frank, when we did our first branding research, people told us that they love the Museum of Science and Industry. It's their favorite museum. Experiences like the submarine and the coal mine were things that they treasured, but that most recently when they went, it was dirty, broken, and tired. So that began the process of a real redevelopment process where we raised a lot of money and redid 70% of the museum floor. We also rebranded the museum after its 75th anniversary. And in that 6 years that I was there, to keep the guest counts up, we had a very aggressive temporary exhibit program. So that time there was, I mean, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I still love that place. Opened 4 permanent exhibits, opened and closed probably about 15 temporary exhibits. Everything from, we opened the first Harry Potter exhibit. We opened this first CSI exhibit. We did a Star Wars exhibit. I worked on Body Worlds, which was a really interesting concept that was brought to us from Europe. That was an amazing experience. It was wild and woolly. Opened the Submarine, which was phenomenal.
I would tell you this. I've been there before. I love it. It's probably one of my favorite museums. I will tell you that. Every time I go to Chicago, I want to go there. What would make you want to leave a place like that? Because it is a great museum, I would say that.
So after spending 6 years there in the role of director of marketing, where I oversaw market research, sponsorship development, group sales, tourism marketing, and all the advertising, I just wanted to grow a little bit. And so an opportunity was presented to me. I moved to the Chicago Architecture Foundation as the VP of Marketing and Audience Development. Have you been there?
I haven't been there.
Okay.
I have not been there.
It's actually like a museum in reverse. So the theory of the Chicago Architecture Foundation, which is now called the Chicago Architecture Center, is that the city of Chicago is the greatest lab of architecture in the country, and that to inspire people to be good stewards of their built environment, they need to understand what their built environment is, and so we take them on tours. So they took about 600,000 people a year on different types of experiences, mostly a river cruise, bus tours, walking tours, and a festival called Open House Chicago. And so kind of like a museum, but instead of going to exhibits under a roof, you go outside.
Right, right. So when did the first opportunity come to you to be interested in this facility here?
Well, I spent 6 years at the Chicago Architecture Center, and then I got a call about working for United Wave Metro Chicago, and so I did that for 5 years, and that was, it really appealed to me because Chicago, similar to Louisville, has a lot of challenges. You know, it's a very segregated community, extremely segregated city. There's definitely there is this sense of the have and have-nots. And so I spent 5 years there, went through the pandemic, and it was during the pandemic that I got a call from a recruiter and said, you know, we'd love to talk to you about the Muhammad Ali Center. And I was like, well, I'll think of somebody for you, but that's, you know, not for me. I don't, you know, where is it again? Louisville? Where exactly is Louisville? And so this went back and forth, and they, you know, they said, no, please just do one interview. And I did one interview and kind of fell in love with the concept of the Muhammad Ali Center.
Tell me about the difference. Tell me about your first impressions of the center when you first got here.
Well, so the first couple of interviews were on Zoom because it was kind of we were still in the pandemic. And so I really didn't understand what the center was. I mean, we didn't have a great website at the time.
You've done a lot with that. You've done a lot with that. I know that for sure.
Yeah, and you know, so the marketing wasn't clear, the language wasn't clear, there weren't good visuals on the website. So I had no idea really what to expect. I kind of thought it would be like this museum about Muhammad Ali, which it is, but when I got here, it's like, it's so much more than that, really. And it's really a place of inspiration. We believe that the center inspires the next generation of change makers. And with my programming background, my work at United Wave Metro Chicago, and then my museum work, to me, it was like, this is the perfect opportunity to blend the two things that I'm really passionate about.
Let me ask you this question.
Okay.
Let's say I'm first time coming.
Okay.
I don't know anything about the center, but I know Muhammad Ali.
Right.
Of course, everybody knows that name. Let's say that I'm coming here for the first time and you're my tour guide. What's the first thing you're going to do for me?
The first thing I'm going to do is take you up to the Orientation Theater and let you sit in the first part of the experience, which is a 15-minute film about Muhammad Ali's life, where you get to see that he was so much more than a boxer. And then you're going to go through the 5th floor. The museum is curated around his 6 core principles, and there's a pavilion for each core principle, so you get to spend time in those. And then you go through his boxing history, and then you go down into his, you actually get to, a lot of people who are boxing fans love to sit and watch his films. So these little kiosks where you can sit and pull up films and watch him fight and understand his unique style. But then you go into what we call lighting the way, which is when he lit the torch for the Atlanta Olympics. And then you start to understand his humanitarian work. And so that's really the trajectory of his life. We're actually installing some new things, and we're going to actually talk about his passing as well in the very near future. I think that's going to be opened in May. We have temporary exhibits as well. And the philosophy of our temporary exhibits in our programming is that they should be centered around advancing and celebrating racial and social justice. So that's the experience.
How important is this facility to not only Louisville, but to the world, in your opinion?
I think this experience is very important to Louisville because there is only one Muhammad Ali Center in the world. And so he is still an incredibly relevant figure, even though he passed in 2016. His voice, his message really relates to people of all ages. And we see that every day when we bring high school students in here. They are so captivated by his journey. And especially one of the principles that really talks to a lot of our young people is conviction. That Muhammad put everything he had on the line to follow his convictions, especially around not participating in the Vietnam War. And he lost his boxing license. He lost his ability to generate revenue for his family. And he was willing to do that because he was a pacifist and didn't believe in going to war. And so that is, what I think people really take to when they come to the center.
I know that obviously he was an activist, and I know that at one time people would call Louisville ground zero, especially for social activism. How does this center kind of relate to that?
Yeah, so we say that one of the things that we do is, like, this is a place you come to meet the people who are changing the world. So through our public programming, you are meeting people who have shaped various areas of social and racial justice. We have our Daughters of Greatness program that's been going on for 10 years, celebrating women who work in areas whose work has advanced justice. We have our annual humanitarian, Muhammad Ali Humanitarian Awards, and that is a program that celebrates humanitarians who do phenomenal work around the world. So we bring them to Louisville. And then we have our after-school program for young people in high school, and we put the same question to them. How are you going to change your community? How are you going to change the world? And so they go through a year-long program on how they develop their own social justice journey and how they develop the skills to be change makers in their community. Most of the kids go through the program for about, on average, 2 years before they go off to college. So those are the different ways that I think that we inspire people to be advocates of justice.
What's on the horizon for the center, that is? I'll get to something else a little bit later. So what's on the horizon for the center?
Well, we have a couple of things that are going on. One is we just launched our website, which is a change maker. So Muhammad is one of the most photographed, one of the most written about and filmed individuals on planet Earth. But there was no place to really learn about his story online. And in 2024, we are a digital world. So we relaunched our website that has a lot of information and timelines about his life, his humanitarian work, his boxing career. We have actually an editorial calendar where we're putting up we're going deep into different themes of his life. And that has been a change maker for the center. Just in the past 5 months, we have over 70,000 unique visitors coming to the website.
I did have a question for you. Someone asked me, knowing that I was going to interview you today, they wanted to know how involved the Alis were regarding the center right now.
Sure. So Lonnie Ali is our co-founder, and she's very involved in the center. And one of the things that we undertook recently this year, as part of our new strategic plan, is creating pathways for engagement for the entire family. So Muhammad had 9 children, and we have talked to each one of them, and we had our first family meeting just a few weeks ago where we shared with them the progress so that they have an authentic relationship with the center and see this as a vehicle and a way for them to honor their father's legacy.
What are you most proud of in your tenure here?
I am proud of, the website. I'm also really proud of our first-year college program, which we launched in partnership with Hanover College 3 years ago. And it's a really fascinating program where college students have the opportunity to come to the center, have a common experience. The entire freshman class at Hanover College comes to the center, has a freshman common experience, and then goes through a 16-week course about leadership, community building, and what does it mean to be a college student at that campus. And what they've seen is incredible results with resiliency, people staying at the campus. And so we received a grant from the Graham Brown Foundation to expand that to other colleges in the Kentuckiana area. So we have several colleges that we're talking to now that want to replicate the program on their campus. So that's something I think to be really proud of.
Well, I will say this. I know that the center is a lot different from when I first came here, especially since you have arrived. But sounds like I'm about to say I'm going to miss you. Obviously, if it's not well known, you've taken a job somewhere else.
Yes.
Talk about your next steps. Talk about your next venture.
So I recently accepted the position as the president and CEO of the American Alliance of Museums. A lot of people ask what that is. It is not a museum, but it's really the organization that oversees the sector of museums. They have over 35,000 museum members and museum professionals that are part of the program. And it's the organization that supports all the accreditation of museums, professional development trainings. They have a big annual conference where they have a big trade show floor where people get to meet the people that make museums work. Exhibit designers, developers, traveling exhibits. They advocate for the sector. And I get to be the face of American Alliance of Museums.
You've done a lot in your 25 years of life. Okay, maybe that's funnier in my head. Anyway,
Yes.
you've done a lot over your career.
Yes.
And it's prepared you to be where you are right now and where you're going. If I had a daughter, what advice would you give her as she's growing up on her path? What would you tell her?
I would tell her what I tell my 3 kids, which is find something that you love doing, something that brings you joy every day, and don't worry about the money, because the money will eventually come, because you'll be able to work hard at it, you'll be good at it, and opportunities will open up for you to advance. I think a lot of young people worry about, and my kids too, worry about I gotta make a lot of money. Well, it's really hard to make a lot of money when you don't enjoy what you're doing.
What advice would you give your 10-year-old self?
Oh my gosh, I was such a shy 10-year-old. I would say the advice I would give was to continue to dream, to continue to explore, and to continue to have adventures, and they will lead you somewhere. And don't worry about, having that clear crystal vision for yourself when you're 10 years old. It will work itself out.
Would you change anything?
No, I wouldn't change anything. I think that, everything I've done has been a unique experience and that have laddered up some way to where I'm going, in the next few months. It's been a great journey. I've met a lot of people I loved working with. I'm still, as Carolyn Tandy at her Daughter of Greatness said, she collects people, and that really resonated with me because I collect people. So I'm friends with I have friends still for almost every job I've ever had.
And I was going to ask you that question, something I didn't ask you earlier. You are a role model to people. Who were some of your role models?
Wow, that's a great question. So I think, my mom and my grandmother were certainly role models of people who, had aspirations for themselves and for their family. My father is a role model. My father is one of them. He was a pediatrician. That was what he did. And he was incredibly kind and generous. And I never saw my father get mad at anybody or yell at anybody. And so whenever I think what's the right thing to do, I always say what would my dad do? So err on the side of kindness, because that's how my father is. I think some of my other role models are people in the museum industry. David Messina, who was the president of the Museum of Science and Industry when I worked there, incredible fundraiser and had was able to allow his staff to create a vision that he could get behind and then go out and get the resources for them to implement that vision. You're
going to be leaving eventually. When you leave, what do you want people to say about you, about this position, about you, once you're gone?
I hope that they say that, Marilyn came to Louisville and made a real difference in her 2 years here. Opened up the center to the community, partnered with the community in multiple ways, and brought a lot of energy to the center and put it on a pathway through our strategic plan for continued growth and future success.
2 more questions and I'll let you go. First question is, what is one thing that people don't know about you that you think they should know?
Let's see. That, I don't know what people know. One thing that people should know about me that I don't think they do is that I grew up in Brooklyn, and that at one time I thought about being a musician.
Okay. Last question. And I know this is off the wall question. I go visit a lot of schools, and every time I go somewhere, I get a chance to talk to kids about what I do. And one kid asked me, well, what are you doing tomorrow? I said I was going to be here, and I was going to interview the president of the Ali Center. And they wanted to know one question, and this is off the wall. What kind of cake do you like?
Oh, my favorite
and this
cake.
is coming from a kid at Dunn Elementary. They want to know what cake you like.
My favorite cake is caramel cake.
Caramel cake. Okay, I will report back that you like caramel cake.
Yes.
And next time I go over there, I'll let them know.
Okay.
Ms. Jackson, I want to say thank you. It's been a couple years. I know you've been here. Unfortunately, I haven't had an opportunity to meet you until today, and I wish that I would have met you a lot sooner. I've heard a lot of great things about you, and everything I've heard seems to be true. I know you're going to a different place, but I know this is not necessarily home, but I always consider Louisville home for you, if you don't mind.
Yes, and I plan to stay connected to the Ollie Center in multiple ways over the next couple of years. I think this is a really important institution in America, and there's very few places like that celebrate a Black man in this way, and I think it's critically important that at a national level we continue to make sure that this place is growing and thriving, and so I plan to do my part.
Well, as we close, we always like to close with one phrase. Doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter what I think. At the end of the day, it's all a matter of perspective. Thank you for coming on this show, and we appreciate you being here and the service that you provided to this community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.